is Ella Granger, and I will be presenting my thesis on the value of a Christian education in a child's formative years. The love of a family is life's greatest blessing. While this quote from one of the most influential Salvation Army generals, Eva Burroughs, known as the People's General, is undoubtedly true, it is also true that accompanying the joys of a family are many decisions that need to be made regarding the well-being and safekeeping of one's family members, especially children. These decisions range from ones of little value to others that have life-altering consequences. One weighty decision every family has to make is the choice of where to send their child to school. While some parents have a strong opinion on which they think is the correct form of education, rooted in deep research and countless prayers, others settle on an option that is convenient or out of necessity, hoping that their decision is what is best. Simply stated, choosing a child's education is not simply achieved. A parent needs to not only trust the reputation of a school, but also be certain that their child will be safe, and know that the teachings they are receiving will align with the priorities and beliefs of each individual's home. For 7 hours, 5 days a week, a child is impacted by the environment and the background of the education that he or she decides to take. On average, a child spends 1,300 hours in school per year. And by the time the child graduates, he or she has spent roughly 19,000 to 20,000 hours in school. What is being taught during those hours shape a child's way of thinking. Different schools exude and teach different morals. Christian schools are built on the foundation of biblical truths, while other forms of schooling are taught through a non-parochial perspective. God says that through Jesus, all things hold together. And if Jesus is the glue of our lives, should not the purpose of every task we do, including a child's education, have Jesus Christ at the center of it? The methods used in the education of children align with Sparta's intentions in beginning their warrior training. In Sparta, in 400 BC, boys were trained from the age of 7 to be strong warriors who were able to withstand unmatched hardships and deprivations. To be certain the fittest and healthiest boys were chosen for battle, the Spartan elders would interrogate the young boys. The selected boys were then sent away from their parents at the age of 7 to an agage. An agage is a place of studying and training that is made to mold boys into vigorous warriors who are both physically and mentally fit. One part of their education was to teach the boys how to endure the heat and the cold. To do this, each boy is provided one cloak to wear year-round, and they are forced to go barefoot so that their feet would become hard and dry. Additionally, the boys were given a strict diet that was proposed to keep the boys slim while also growing them taller. Also, the Spartan elders used the boys' hunger as a teaching tactic. The boys' hunger would then push them to steal from the gardens, which taught them resourcefulness and shyness. At the agages, military training did not begin until the boys were adults. The main focus of an agage was to teach men how to be compliant members of society and make them willing to give their all for Sparta. Spartan elders knew if they illustrated the brutal warrior life to boys at a young age, the boys would become desensitized to the pains of the warrior life and learn to fight with courage. Sparta's main goal was to create unparalleled warriors, and they knew the best way to instill in the boys the life of a warrior was to surround and educate them of it all day, every day, from the early age of 7. Spartans discovered that beginning warrior training at a young age was the most effective. Similarly, training a child in godliness from a young age will instill a basis for the deepest form of faith. A child's elementary education lays the foundation of beliefs that will be carried on into later seasons of life. Christian schools, whether that is homeschooling or attending a school, teach subjects through the lens of the Bible. Non-parochial schools, on the other hand, provide an education void of any specific church or religious affiliations. And the danger of attending a non-parochial school is the lack of teaching creation and biblical history. When a child is taught to see the world through the lens of Christ from a young age, it will become habitual as he grows older. Therefore, in primarily seeking a child's religious prosperity, a child should receive a Christian elementary education over a non-parochial education. An erudite and scholarly style education is being provided to the general youth of our nation, but is greatly void in guiding students to adopt a worldview that aligns with the Bible. Susan Schaefer Macaulay, the author of For the Children's Sake, expresses the impact that can be made on a child's life when the educator has a conscious eye for the eternal destinies of the children. Even when a parent acknowledges that their main goal is to train their child in the way they should go, decisions on schooling can often be difficult. An example of this occurred in 2007. A Christian family was faced with the choice of where and how to educate their 5-year-old son. In the area, there was a well-attended public elementary school, a Christian church school that was accompanied by a large tuition fee, and the option of homeschooling. The family researched each option. The Christian school seemed the best choice, but the cost was too high. And homeschooling seemed like a great option, but the mom worked and provided a substantial amount of the family's income. While the family's number one value was their child's future faith, the public school seemed the best choice given their financial situation. So the parents decided that they would seek even more diligently to instill Christian values from home. Fast forward 4 years, the son is receiving a quality education, he has exemplary grades, and the family appears to be thriving, at least thriving according to worldly standards. However, the parents realize that while their son is learning a great deal, there seems to be minimal spiritual growth. Every evening, the son comes home reciting to his parents all that he has learned, but he never mentions God. After much contemplation on the topic, the parents decide to unenroll their son from the public school and begin a Christian homeschool course. With the ability to filter education through the lens of a biblical worldview, the parents notice their son becoming curious about his faith. He begins talking about God with full confidence that Christ is the basis for everything. His science is based on a Christian view of creation. In literature, he reads books that point him back to Christ. All of his subjects stem from a foundation in Christianity. And now the son is not only being taught the subjects, but he is able to understand the true purpose of learning, to appreciate the knowledge of God's creation that he has bestowed on his people, and to use it for his glory. For this family, homeschooling was a large financial sacrifice. However, Christ's callings on our lives require sacrifice in placing all trust in him that he will provide if it is part of his plan to further his kingdom. If a parent does not strive to imprint a Christian faith into their child at a young age, then how is the child supposed to know how to live a Christ-like life? When a child hears one thing at home, but then attends school for 7 hours a day, never hearing the name of Christ, it can be confusing. His value of Christianity can be skewed by the countless conflicting influences on his life. Faith and learning are not separate, and in so many areas they intertwine to uncover the full truth. The only way to truly understand the purpose of anything is through first understanding that creation is Christ's marvelous work, and every piece of knowledge should stem from a foundation in Christianity. A Christian education is highly beneficial to grow kids in the truth that every segment of life should be centered first and foremost around Christ. Susan Schaefer Macaulay highlights the fact that many adults treat children like they are clueless, when in reality, it is quite the opposite. Children are capable of thinking through complex situations. They have an intense curiosity and are beginning to question concepts and understand cause and effect. However, at a young age, children are not yet able to form their own opinions because they are naive. Children have not yet had enough experiences to understand right versus wrong. During the ages 0 to 5, a child's brain grows 90%. And during this time, the brain makes connections that form an individual's way of thinking, learning, behavior, and emotions. The brain makes connections through the living of everyday experiences. It takes account of the positive and/or negative interactions to form connections, healthy or not, that will last a lifetime. At a young age, parents have control over what their child experiences. And if experiences form the brain's connections, and parents have control over what their young child experiences, then a parent's role is paramount to building their child's way of thinking and behavior. And it is incredibly vital to a child's direction of eternal prosperity that parents monitor what their child can both see and do. A Christian perception of education highly differs from the world's perception of education. Worldly values consist of material possessions, financial stability, high status, and chasing after what makes you happy. And all of these passions inherently are not bad. However, when you filter them through the lens of Christ being at the center, they all change. Wealth and material possessions are fleeting compared to eternal treasures, and high status in heaven holds a much heavier weight than high status on the earth. And as Christians, we chase not after what will make us temporarily happy, but what will bring eternal joy. Spiritual battles are difficult enough with the constant implementation of Christian values from a young age. The devil takes every opportunity that he can to kidnap God's children. And parents need to be alert of spiritual warfare and take every moment captive to teach their child about the goodness of God. Sending a young premature child to a public school at a young age can introduce them to many unrighteous concepts at too young of an age. Surrounding a child in a Christian atmosphere from the beginning is highly beneficial to a child's direction of eternal prosperity. Scriptural-based education is necessary to sprout a life rooted in focus on a joyful, prosperous eternity. Each family has their own journey. For one family with 5 kids, their journey led them down several different paths: Christian school, homeschool, and public school. Throughout the process of deciding where to send each of their children, the parents diligently sought the Lord's guidance. At one point, all 5 kids attended the same Christian private school. This seemed like the ideal situation. However, due to the school being a long distance from the home and the children becoming more involved in extracurricular activities, it was difficult to get the kids to and from school. Also, the cost of 5 kids in private school was great. So the parents found it best to disenroll all 5 kids. The oldest attended the local public high school, the middle 2 resumed homeschooling, and the youngest 2 attended a Christian school that was located close to the home. After some time, the middle child grew to dislike remaining at home for extended periods of time while the mom was at work. She felt like she was missing out on social activities and wanted to attend school again. Now, the Christian school that her younger siblings were attending was not an option because they did not offer classes at her grade level. So, in her 7th grade year, she began at another Christian school located slightly further but still close to the home. Her first interaction with the girls was the week before school began at cheer camp. Initially, the girls seemed kind. However, as the week progressed, they were not very welcoming. She noticed they all looked the same, dressed the same, and talked the same. However, she did not. And she realized that making friends was going to take more of an effort than she had initially realized. However, she knew she was a caring person and was willing to put forth the effort. When her first day arrived, she entered the school with confidence in who she was and excitement for what was to come. For the first few weeks, she gave her best effort to show people her kindness and loving personality. Although she had easily made friends in the past, at her new school it was difficult because no one seemed to reciprocate her desire for new friendships. Some of the students accepted her, while others returned her comments with ignorant responses and rude looks. It began to seem that some of the students attended the school valuing status rather than the pursuit of a Christian education. Over time, the negative comments she received far outweighed the positive, and the girl began to close herself off from those around her. She first began to pull away from the kids at school, but then her self-isolation bled into her relationships with her close family and friends. Every morning and evening, the girl dreaded the 7 hours she had to spend surrounded by those who continued to label her with offensive comments and jokes. At the school, she did receive a high level of education. However, the label of it being a Christian school was reduced to a daily 30-minute Bible class teaching religion in Wednesday chapel that was led by the same students who bullied her and other classmates during the week. The girl cried many nights trying to understand what God was doing in her life. While the girl continued to tell her parents that everything was fine, the parents sought the Lord's guidance. After attending the school for a little over a year, the girl's mother found her crying alone. Despite being unsure of what the next step was for their daughter, they knew that her current situation was harming her and needed to be changed. Michael Buckley states, "Don't judge the many by the actions of the few." Just because there are instances where Christian education is not evidently beneficial does not mean that a Christian education should be avoided altogether. The most accessible Christian education may not be the best choice for each child, and it may take more than one attempt to find the best environment and education for each child. However, a Christian education is still highly beneficial to a child's direction of eternal prosperity. Oftentimes, individuals believe that a Christian school isolates children from the real world. However, the true illusionary world is public school. Some public schools present the belief that God does not exist and that He has no part to play in our daily lives. Children who attend a non-parochial school are more likely to believe the fantasy that the world came to be through evolution, children can choose whether they want to be a boy or a girl, and that marriage can be between two men or two women. At non-parochial schools, there are no subjects taught to direct a child's heart toward biblical values. And non-parochial schools do not prepare students for the actual real world where God does exist. Instead, it can present false beliefs that can negatively affect a child's biblical thought process. In reality, God is the creator of the world, and He reigns over it as a sovereign king forever. He determines what biblical values are and why they should be lived out. He is the creator of science and mathematics, the author of history, and the one who defines humanity. A true Christian education teaches children about the real biblical world while exposing them to the opposing worldly beliefs through a biblical analysis. Oftentimes, parents overlook the option of Christian schooling because it is too expensive. A parent may remark that they would rather send their child to public school, save the money that they would spend on a Christian education, and utilize that saved money to spend it on pleasures for their child, such as exotic vacations, new clothes, parties, etc. When a parent values materialistic happiness for their child, they are illustrating a life where joy is found in material possessions over eternal awards. Christian schools provide an education that focuses not only on temporary academic achievements, but also on the eternal wisdom that is necessary to prosper in spiritual life. Providence Classical Academy expresses, as Christians, we seek to grow children who are culturally engaged, intellectually curious, spiritually vibrant, and socially mature. Christian schools prepare students who do not only meet earthly standards, but who also seek to reach God's standards. Matthew 6:33 states, "But seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well." When we seek first the expansion of God's kingdom, He will provide all the accommodations that are necessary to grow His kingdom. Ultimately, when the cost of a Christian education is analyzed from an eternal perspective, non-Christian education is far more costly. When we trust that God will provide what is needed for the eternal prosperity of each child, He will provide. As it declares in Matthew 6, when we seek first the expansion of His kingdom, He will meet all of our needs. All of the stories that I have told today are stories from my life. Different forms of education have impacted my family in countless personal ways, and each stage of education has played a different part in forming my testimony to grow me into who I am today. The end goal of education is not only to grow broad thinkers, but ultimately to guide students to seek after Christ. So teachers, your role is not only to grow students in knowledge, but ultimately to grow disciples of Christ. And parents, while you are your child's caretaker, most importantly, you are to guide your student along the path that walks with the Lord. And to my fellow students, it's not gaining popularity or being the best scholar or even getting the best job that brings the most satisfaction. Our end purpose is to know Christ and to make him known. As Pastor Andy Stanley confirms, Jesus makes life better and makes you better at life. Scriptural-based Christian education is necessary to teach a child that all of life and all of learning is for the sole purpose of glorifying God, the creator of everything. Thank you. I would now like to take questions from the judges.
Ella, do you have that many siblings?
I have 4 siblings and 2 of them are married. Or one's a fiance and then one's married.
I didn't realize you had that many.
Yes, ma'am.
Ella, what was your primary source?
My primary source was For the Children's Sake by Susan Schaefer Macaulay, which was based off of a Charlotte Mason.
I was about to ask you, because I've read the same book, and I worked at a school that was Charlotte Mason based before coming
Yes,
here.
sir.
Are you familiar with Charlotte Mason? And I'm curious how much that has impacted your view of education.
Well, it was my primary source, and it was what ultimately guided my decision on a Christian education. I was not familiar with it before my topic.
Yeah.
However, she was the best source that I could find about my topic. And ultimately, at first, I was trying to decide which was the best form of schooling, homeschool, public school, or Christian school. But after reading her book, it made me form homeschool and Christian school together, just based off of her views. And so, anyways,
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
I'm not very familiar with her, but I know her now.
Yeah. Well, I'm impressed.
Ella, great job. This is going to be similar to a weird question, but I'm curious of the most formative ways that 2 things happen. One, what your parents did positively, because your parents have done a phenomenal job with you and your siblings. But 2, what's been most formative with the school, whether it be teachers or peers?
This school,
Yeah.
specifically?
Yeah.
Well, gracious, I might cry.
No pressure.
I had a really hard time in middle school, just with people and friends. And then I came to Providence, and it was like everyone just kind of welcomed me. And it was God's way of being like, I'm still here for you, and I got you, and I'll put people in your life that will help you. And so I would say peers, but then also my teachers have been amazing, and always, especially theology classes, y'all's theology classes made me think deeper, and so it's impacted me mentally with peers, and also spiritually with peers, and spiritually with teachers, and just everything.
Yeah,
great.
thank you. I want to say one more thing. Your presentation could be a great commercial for Providence.
Yes.
But even more than that, you and your classmates are walking billboards for our school. And you've done a phenomenal job. And the way your faith is so central to your life is what we want for all of our students. So thank you for modeling that.
So I am assuming that the middle school student you were talking about was yourself.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So you've talked about non-parochial schools, Christian schools, and homeschooling, but Providence is a little different because we're a classical school. Not all classical schools are Christian schools, and not all Christian schools are classical schools. Was the middle school that you attended a classical school also?
It was not classical.
So did your research lead you in any way, or can you on your own make a discernment about what maybe makes that different?
between the
The
classical and
classical
non-classical
school and a classical Christian school.
Well, specifically, my thesis had nothing to do with classical school. However, personally, in my life, I'm touching the mic. I would go back and do classical school a ton of times again because I don't know the way that this is crazy. I'm saying this, but your writing assignments that you would have due at the end of class. I love you, Miss Cheney, but I did not like those. But now that I look back on them, the way that impacted my thinking and made me think a lot quicker and be able to discern my thoughts quicker, I very much appreciate that. And I think that is something that comes with the classical education. And so I really appreciate it. I think it's made me think deeper. And someone mentioned something earlier or a different day about we don't just focus on learning knowledge, but we think deeper and we think more about the why and the how and the what it's coming from. And it's formed my thinking. I think it's improved it and benefited from it.
Ella, you did a great job. I'm very proud of your work. Thank you for sharing a personal story. I know that's hard. But I have a question because your parents and your whole family went through the process. Do you think that a family that cannot afford such an education that you wrote about and spoke about, do you think they can still instill a biblical worldview, a strong warrior in the faith, that they can have the same benefits and outcomes if they're not able to send their kiddos to a private Christian school?
Yes, ma'am. I absolutely believe that they can because I know many people that a lot of my friends have gone to public school and turned out amazing. And I believe, I had this one line in my thesis, that whatever is needed for a child's eternal prosperity and for whatever God has in store for them, He will provide what is needed. And I think in my life at that time, I needed a Christian environment of great people. And the Lord provided the money for my family for me to be able to have that. And so yeah, I don't think you have to, but I think it is so beneficial because I've seen the fruit in my life and in all my siblings' life and a lot of my friends' lives. But the Lord will ultimately provide what is needed.
You had one section that I think was probably more powerful than you realize, and a line where I chuckled out loud. It ended with the real world where God does exist. And you were pointing out that a secularized public school where religion is taboo to talk about is actually the synthetic, made-up non-reality. I don't think Christians are bold enough to say that very often. And so this is not a question. It's just I thought that was a brilliant line, and I appreciated it.
Did any of you, just you're thinking about this, you're describing this in the formative years, like that's in your title. I mean, does this differentiate between preschool, elementary school? Like, are there any differences between those things? Is it primarily preschool? Is it primarily elementary school? Where do we see the most benefits in having Christian education being effective for, I like your phrase, eternal prosperity. There you go, eternal prosperity.
My thesis, I specifically focused on elementary education because as I experienced in my life, my elementary education and the Christian foundation that I received from it, whenever I went to middle school and had a rough time, I was able to not stray from the Lord, and that's such a God thing because I came here for 4th and 5th grade, so I had a Christian education, and before that I was homeschooled in a very godly family who always sought the Lord. And so I focus on elementary education because I also found a study that talked about the different developments in each stage of life. In middle school is identity, and what you previously learned before that is what you will base your identity off of, if that makes sense. And so I think forming the Christian basis in elementary school will impact you the rest of your life, because also that's the most formative time of your life is whenever you're young because you're learning everything. So yes.
Thank you.
Ella, I remember in this process when we were trying to think about the the bigger issue. And then you came up with this idea about the agave, and you drew the comparison in your paper about you whatever you teach a child when they're very, very, very young, look how long it stays with them, stays with them their whole life. So you took something that, kind of the modern education system, and you said, look, this has been going on for years, the way we're raising kids, and we need to pay very close attention to what we're doing when they're very young, because that will impact them forever. So you did all the things so well in this process. We're obviously very, very proud of you. Good job, Ella. You are